On this week's Deconstructing Comics, an interview with Derf Backderf, author of My Friend Dahmer and Trashed. We talk about the upcoming Dahmer movie, the world garbage problem discussed in Trashed, and more. Also, Kumar and I review Trashed. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support. This is Tim.
This is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne for, I don't remember how long. Oh, I guess the last one we did was Transmetropolitan. It wasn't all that long ago.
Yeah.
It always seems longer ago than it actually was. It seems like, oh, it's been 5 years, and it was actually 6 months or something.
Yeah. Well, you've been overseas and stuff, and that adds time.
Right, yeah.
The time.
The Transmetropolitan one went up while I was there, while I was in the U.S., But yeah, when we recorded that, or just after maybe, I think you sent me an email and you said we should talk about Derf's book, Trashed. Mm-hmm. And we had, of course, done My Friend Dahmer a couple years ago. And so I kind of had that on my mind, and I was thinking, well, doesn't Derf live in Ohio? And I'm going to be in Columbus. And, you know, he had sent us a comment when we reviewed Dahmer. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll reach out to him and see if there's any chance that he could be down from Cleveland while I'm there. And it turned out that he had been planning to go to the Billy Ireland Museum sometime during August to see the 40th anniversary exhibit. So he worked it so that he could be there on basically the only day that I could do it, which was August 2nd. So I've already posted on Facebook and posted also with the episode a couple weeks ago, the picture of me with Derf, Steve Bissett, Tom Spurgeon, and Craig Fisher, who was traveling with Steve. Which is a pretty good photo. So I did interview Derf. So we thought we would put the interview and a review of Trash together in one episode. And so we kind of went back and forth on which should be first. So we thought we'd go ahead. Finally decided we'll do the review here, and then maybe have the kind of break in the show, and then do the interview, and then maybe come back and say a few things about the interview. But so I was reading this book, you know, while I was preparing to talk to him, and then I went back and reread it for this. And what really struck me, and I think he comments on this in the interview, was how many levels the book works on.
Oh yeah. I
mean, you know, there's the environmental aspect. You know, we're drowning in garbage, which is kind of disturbing. And then there's educational aspect, like about the history of garbage. And, you know, humans have always thrown a lot of stuff away. It's just that now there are a lot more of us is the problem. And, you know, like the history of landfills and the history of garbage trucks, and, you know, that's all pretty interesting. But then he also has this sort of semi-memoir aspect. It's fictionalized, but a lot of it is based on his experience as a garbage man back around 1979-80, and then, you know, interviews that he did with garbage men later. And sort of this kind of be nice to garbage men message, or they will not be nice to you. and then the gross out humor, and then some of it is not even really about garbage. It's just kind of about small town life and politics, and how a lot of these towns are, in decline. There are a lot of different aspects to it, and you almost feel like it shouldn't work, but it does. How can you cram all of this in one book?
Yeah, there's a very interesting structure to it, but it's also you didn't mention that it's structured into seasons. Like there's 4 seasons plus a prologue and an epilogue, and that's how the chapters are divided up. I don't know. I don't know. Does it work? I think it does, but I think he must have wrestled with it for a long time to work out exactly how to structure it. Because there's also it's interesting how he layers kind of subplots into the story. Like there's this dog chaser Merv.
Yeah, the dog catcher.
He's the dog catcher, and he's really quite old. I think he's 81. And like during one of the seasons, you find out that he's had a stroke. And it's a very peripheral kind of fact when they meet him. And then the next season, he has passed away. So there's also like that kind of, he's kind of creating a passage of time through that as well.
Yeah, well, and before that, we see how he's kind of going off the rails, like thinking that these, pet dogs are coyotes out to get him and shooting them dead. And and the protagonists see these dogs in his trunk who would have collars on. Like, these are not coyotes.
Yeah. But the thing about that structure of it is like the thing that worked, that I thought was really maybe my favorite sequence in the book was once you realize what's happening. It's starts in spring. I can't remember fall. So anyway, but you get to winter,
maybe spring,
and so each chapter has a frontispiece which shows a garbage can in that season. So it's like covered in fall leaves, and you see the snow one, and it's like, uh-oh. And when you go from there, like, because you've already seen the hell these guys have gone through the previous 2 seasons, then you get to winter, and every single panel is just like, I can't believe this is happening. So they're like walking through this horrible storm. They're wearing electric socks, and then the truck is broken down. Then they go out in the snow, and the trash cans are frozen to the ground. Then they dump the stuff out, and it's frozen, and like the garbage is frozen inside the cans. And then the liquid goop has frozen into solid ice cubes. And then, they're inhaling the exhaust fumes from the truck.
Yeah, because they've got that old truck they call Cyclops that has exhaust coming out at face level for a garbage man, perched on the back.
Right, and then the truck completely does a 90-degree slide in the snow, which I don't know if driving in Canada, this has happened to me more than once, where you lose control of the car and it just starts to slide in the snow, and it's this huge truck, and then the snowplow comes by and covers them in snow. And it's just one thing after another. It's so unbelievable.
Yeah, and somehow this book became funnier with repeat readings, because you kind of, or at least for me, I kind of got into the spirit of like, oh no, somebody threw away this. Oh, we have to deal with this. It just somehow got funny. I mean, you kind of feel for the garbage men at the same time, but they have these kind of dramatic takes on the things. It reminded me of the comics that my brother and I used to make, where we would have, a really close up of part of somebody's face. They'd be saying, "Oh no, no, no," and then the next panel is the reveal of whatever it is they're seeing. And this was very similar to that.
Right, and I think the timing of the comedy was amazing. Like there's this thing where their boss Wiley keeps following them. He keeps appearing whenever they're goofing off. He seems to magically appear.
Yes.
And or whenever they just that second that they happen to jump off the garbage truck to pull a prank on the driver or something, Wiley tends to show up. And there's a great one where he finds the garbage men find a couch. Somebody's thrown out a couch to the curb, and the Derf analog kind of says, "Okay, I'm going to jump into it. Hey, this looks looking good sofa."
Recliner
chair. He jumps into the lazy boy. It's a reclining lazy boy. He jumps in, and the next panel, the boss drives up in the truck.
Yeah, he sees the truck coming right between his feet that are propped up on the footrest.
Yeah. And there's another great sequence where it's just like one thing after another. Like, where you don't even have a chance to stop kind of laughing when the next thing hits, because there's that great scene where some kids throw rocks at them, and later on, one of the garbage men sees one of the kids from behind. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to get my revenge," and he throws a bag of garbage, which explodes all over the kid. Then they realize it's not the kid, and then the other guy is laughing at what he's done, and a fly goes into his mouth, and he goes hurtling off the back of the garbage truck. Mm-hmm. And it's just like one amazing thing after another.
Yeah, I mean, he had like a year plus of experience that he just kind of crammed in there. I think you can really feel like, a lot of the stuff must have happened, but probably not on the same day.
Oh, yeah, it felt like the town was kind of little, like the village was. I don't know how big their run was, but it seemed like, they go on the start of their run and they would reach the end of it, a few pages later or whatever. Or, at the end of the day, so did they cover the whole village? I don't know, but it seems like a kind of a fictional village that was small enough that they could do everything within that short period of time.
Also, there are a lot of nice kind of little touches, like where he's talking about how, in our minds, when the garbage men pick up the garbage, it's just magically gone. It's like disappeared from the face of the earth. And you have a panel of a garbage truck pulling away, and from where the garbage was, there's this little butterfly.
Yeah.
Which, really sums up, this thing, our thought that, oh, we're clean, we're pure, the garbage is gone.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of places, too, at least, that I caught, where the TV comment is also a commentary on what's going on. Where I think it's the panel where the Derf analog is accepting the job, or he's on the phone, calling in about this job that turns out to be garbage pickup.
Oh, yeah.
And meanwhile, Bugs Bunny is on the TV saying, "What a maroon."
yeah, I noticed that.
And then later, when he's rooming with that guy McGee, and he walks in, and McGee is in the dark meditating to Mr. Rogers. Mm-hmm. And from the TV, it says, "Oh, hi, Trolley. Is it time to go back to reality?"
Right.
Which, McGee has to come back to reality here because he's been meditating. So, all these little touches really, really make it that much better.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think the thing about the garbage disappearing was, I think about garbage all the time. Now, maybe I don't know if I'm unique in this, but I always wonder, like, how landfills work. And I've always wondered, how did the garbage collection system come into place? Like, what was it like before? Like, before we had the tech to do it, how did we do it? Because about them dumping slop into the streets in like the 1600s, and you know what it's like now. But what about those wilderness years? What were they doing? And a lot of that stuff is explained. And I really, for me, after reading Dahmer, I was with this one. I was like, okay, is there going to be an emotional hook? And yes, there certainly was, because I don't think our family produces a lot of garbage, but I certainly do feel guilty about it. The amount that we do produce. Mm-hmm. And that was a hook for me. And the other really fascinating thing about the book is it's not like, the book does not say, hey, we should reduce our garbage. It's not a kind of, I don't know, it doesn't have a message like that. It's really quite pessimistic, because a few times he mentions, well, we could fix this if we, reduced our waste. Yeah. But do you think that's going to happen? He's, it's kind of he's kind of almost, I don't want to say given up, but it's just so pessimistic. Yeah. It's like, it's not going to be fixed. Mm-hmm. There's no out. We've dug ourselves into a hole, pun intended.
Well, and
we're not going to get out of.
After reading this, I was watching Al Gore. He was on, I can't remember if it was Colbert or Daily Show, but And he was talking about the climate, and I was like, why aren't you talking about garbage? We've got to think
Yeah.
about garbage. Climate
Yeah.
is only part of the environmental problem.
Yeah.
And after reading this, I felt like garbage is just as big of an issue.
Because I wonder, like, you think about the amount of garbage that's being produced, and there were some incredible stats in here. Let me see if I can find the one about the. Oh yeah, so there was a line about there's this line on page 111 about the Salton City landfill, and he says in 2008 it was 8 acres, and in 2012 it was 287 acres. And I was like, what? How is that? Is this happening all... Because garbage is constant. Like, we're constantly producing it.
Yeah, well, I think he say that these landfills are being kind of... They'll shut down some and then just make another one larger, just kind of consolidate them into fewer and larger landfills.
Yeah, but to go from 8 to 287 in 4 years was jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
And if you think about this happening to a lot of landfills... it's just, it's hard to even comprehend. But I like that the pessimism about it grabbed me, and that, those shocking bits grabbed me. And there's stuff in here that I never heard of, like the yellow torpedoes. So this is like truck drivers pissing into bottles and throwing out the window. And then what happens is when the lawnmowers come along, these guys on these riding mowers, the bottles explode in their faces. So they have to build these special mowers with glass. Like for the Pope, like it's got glass protection around it, so they don't get hit by these piss bottles. And he said there were 30,000 a year in Utah alone. So how many of these things are out there?
And you think of Utah as being a rather well-behaved state.
Well, yes, but I guess the drivers might be going from one state to another.
Sure, they're just passing through.
There's a lot of
in more ways than one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it really grabbed me for sure. Mm-hmm. On an emotional level too.
Yeah, I mean it's emotional, educational, and amusing. It's kind of a lot to do in one book. But
yeah. But one so in the interview he talks about it a little bit. But how did you feel about the era in which it took place?
Yeah, well, I asked him about, the spinner rack scene, and he sort of regretted putting that in there because he really wanted to sort of include that because it's part of his memory of, way back then in the 70s and 80s. But then, there are scenes of laptops and smartphones and stuff too. I mean, it's sort of his memories of 1979 and 80 transplanted into the present, and sometimes that doesn't quite work. But I mean, other than that first scene, I mean, I don't really think about the technology in it very much. It feels sort of timeless.
Well, I'll tell you why. Yeah, I think it is kind of timeless, but I think there's definitely a sort of dichotomy because on the one hand, like in the opening scene, you've got the cell phone and the laptop. Later on, when he goes into that apartment with McGee, he sticks in a USB stick into an MP3 dock, like some sort of docking player. And somebody uses the word libtard at the end of the book, which is, how long has that word been around? Not long.
Yeah, not well known until Trump came in, basically.
Right, but I don't know what it's like in the States, and I've been in Australia now for like 13 years or something like that.
Yikes.
But we don't have the garbage cans anymore. We've got these what they call wheelie bins, right? Which are a big plastic bin on wheels that you can wheel up to the curb.
And a lot of places in the States have those too, come to think of it.
Right. And the trucks have these hydraulic arms that come down and pick up the garbage. So there's not a guy getting down and like straining his back to pick up the thing off the curb.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's everywhere. I know in Los Angeles they have that, with the truck just picking it up automatically.
Right.
So, of course, this is a small town, so...
Right.
They might not have that level of sophistication.
I'm trying to think of what my hometown is, what they've got there, but I don't know if I've ever noticed garbage pickup in the last 20 years in the few visits I've made. So I don't really know. But yeah, it seemed like the cans seemed kind of old-timey to me. They seemed like not 1980, but like they seemed like the time that he was a garbage man, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into a long thing about the trucks. Like he describes all the what is it called, the crusher thing? But he describes how all the mechanics work of it.
Mm-hmm.
But he never describes one of those hydraulic arms. So it's almost like, did he even know that they exist? Do they have them in Cleveland? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, I don't know. There might be a little bit of a time lag on on some of the stuff in it, but but then he's also at sort of a disadvantage in some of the statistics, since they haven't taken the statistics on some of these things in a long time.
Yeah,
he says that
and they're conflicting. Yeah,
the government just kind of doesn't want anybody to know how bad it is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's certainly not his fault.
Yeah, and the scariest thing was the description of the leachate or the leakate coming out of the landfills. Mm-hmm. That was so horrific.
Yeah, and he says no matter what kind of lining they have, all of the landfills leak.
Yeah, this toxic stuff, which is supposed to get carted off where, I don't know. And how there's an explosive buildup of methane. And also one thing that really was like, okay, if I put this banana peel in the garbage, it's okay because it's going to biodegrade. But what he reveals is once it's covered over, once the landfill is covered over, there's no air or light circulating, so nothing is degrading down there.
Yeah.
It's just stuck.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how biodegradable it is.
Right. Well, I had heard that before. Now there was this garbologist guy whose last name I never figured out how to pronounce. It was spelled Rathje, or Rathje, or Rathye, who in like the 90s would talk about how like you could dig into a landfill and find like 1950s newspapers that you could read over breakfast. They were just completely intact.
Yeah.
So yeah, that didn't surprise me very much, but yeah, still because I think a lot of people still have that idea that these things are biodegradable, so they will biodegrade in a landfill, but it's not how it works. Well, should we go ahead and do the interview?
Yeah, sure. But
right.
I will say it's I do want to say, I think some people came to Dahmer for a kind of sensationalist appeal on the surface, which is the wrong reason to come to that book in the first place. But I do feel this is a great follow-up.
Do you think this could be made into a movie? That might be kind of a challenge, but it should be, but I don't know if it can be.
Wow, it would be interesting. It could be done, but I don't know if people want to hear. It's like people don't want to know about it. People want to know about Dahmer. Nobody wants to know about their garbage.
Yeah, I mean, it would start to. It could come off like kind of a Michael Moore type of movie, except about garbage.
Yes.
I mean, because it's part documentary, obviously.
Yeah, so Moore and Gore could team up and put together a movie.
Mm-hmm. Coming up, my interview with Derf Backderf. Because of the Patreon goals we've recently hit, vintage episodes that have been missing from our website and feed for years are now being released at the rate of one per week. We're working backward, starting with episode 122 this past week, from April 7th, 2008, in which Brandon and I reviewed Spiral Bound by Aaron Rainier and Creature Tech by Doug Tenaple. This coming week, in episode 121, a discussion of Creative Commons copyright. If the podcast feed in your app doesn't go back that far, go to deconstructingcomics.com and scroll down to the archives on the left sidebar. I'm also publishing links to the vintage episodes as they come out on our Facebook page and as a public post at patreon.com/deconcomics. The goals we've hit so far allow me to keep publishing back to episode 101. You can help unlock more vintage episodes by making a pledge. Patrons giving $3 a month or more have been enjoying a collection of cards and letters sent to Stan Lee by celebrities like Bill Watterson, Hugh Hefner, Bill Bixby, Michael Caine, and more. I photographed these letters from among the boxes of Stan Lee's papers being held at the American Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming, this past summer. You can enjoy the letters to Stan, too, and help us unlock more vintage episodes, and get a monthly promo on this podcast for your comic or whatever you want to promote. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics right now and pledge at least $3 a month. We really appreciate your support.
Are you willing to follow me on a journey and risk getting lost in a swirling maze of past ages, protected only by our red indestructible capes as we break through the final unexplored realm of the time barrier to explore the fantastic Silver Age adventures of the world's greatest hero, Superman? If so, join me each week on the Superman Fan Podcast, as together we'll follow the Man of Steel, his cousin Supergirl, and his closest friends, Perry White, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, Batman and Robin, and others in Superman's never-ending quest to defend truth and justice in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, World's Finest Comics, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. Go to the supermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com, available on iTunes and most other podcast aggregators. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Medium, Flipboard, and Stitcher. And after you listen, feel free to send email to supermanfanpodcast@gmail.com. And unless you request otherwise, I look forward to reading your comments on future episodes. And don't forget to wear your red indestructible cape, standard safety equipment for traveling through the time barrier.
I'm with Derf Backderf. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, lucky we could work it out that we're both in Columbus on the same day. So you live in Cleveland.
I live in Cleveland.
You went to San Diego this year?
I did. I just got back.
And how was it?
It was okay. I mean, it's not really my scene. I went last year, so it was still, it wasn't exactly something I wanted to do, but the trailer debuted for the My Friend Dahmer movie, so I had to go out for that and just hung around for a couple days and then came home. It was nothing special.
Okay. Yeah, well, actually, so I collected some questions from listeners via Facebook, and a couple of them were asking about the movie. Mm-hmm. Kumar, who did the review of the book with me on the podcast a couple years ago, he wanted me to ask you about or what you would happen to know about. I don't know how involved you were in making the movie itself.
I provided the source material, and that was about it.
Because sometimes authors really involved, and other times they don't know anything.
No, I didn't want to be. My business is making comics, and because I came to books so late in life, I mean, My Friend Dahmer came out when I was 52 years old. I just want to focus on that, because let's face it, I don't have a 30-year career in front of me. I mean, I'm not being morbid. I just don't have that. So I'd rather just focus on books, and movies are a whole different ball of wax. And I don't understand it all, and I just didn't want to get bogged down with that.
Okay. Yeah, so you may not be able to answer this question, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
You said, be sure to ask him about the Dahmer movie. Anything about the process of the creative transition you can think of? And I said, you mean translating the graphic novel to film? He said, yeah, it seems like it could have easily turned exploitative, but the early buzz is that that's not the case.
No, he was, Mark Myers, the film director, and he did the adaptation too, and he stayed very close to the book. Very, very close.
Yeah,
he pulled a little out of.
It looks that way.
Yeah, he pulled more stuff out of the footnotes, and used some of that. I limited when I did the book. I mean, the parameters I set were, it was My Friend Dahmer, so it was a first-person account. So it was either stuff that I mean, 99% of it was either stuff that I witnessed, stuff my friends witnessed, and until later told me about, or stuff I at least had heard a rumor of, and later learned out, what was. And that's what I limited myself to. And all the other stuff I just threw in the footnotes, and he felt he needed some of that material.
Some of the stuff like you found in your research.
Yeah, about the family, for example, which I didn't include because I wasn't privy to it at the time. Yeah. So, I mean, he included some of that. I had no problem with that because it came out of the footnotes, so I know it was, properly researched. There's only a couple places where he wandered. And so, by and large, it came straight from the book. And his storyboards, they were like clipped panels out of the book, a lot of them. I mean, it was good to see. And he promised he was going to do that at the beginning, which is one of the reasons that I said, gave him the okay. So, it turned out about as well as I had hoped it would.
Okay, great. And Emmett, who's on the show sometimes, he said, I was going to suggest the movie too, and the prospect of wider reception given the growing interest in true crime.
Okay. What's the question, though?
Well, yeah, I guess, I don't know, I guess wider reception, he means kind of beyond the sort of usual comics world.
Beyond sure it will, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, film in general, that's often the case, I guess, but...
I think a lot of people... Well, I mean, the audience is varied because, you have your traditional film crowd that you get with indie film, successful indie films. I mean, we all know the kind of the archetype there. And then you have the lead actor, Ross Lynch, was a Disney actor, and he's a pop star now, and he has 5 million followers. I mean, he's just, he comes with this massive, sort of pop fan audience, and then there are the comics people. So you have this varied audience. So yeah, it's going to have cast more of a wider net, which the book did too a little. I mean, the book was kind of a breakout book. It got beyond the comics audience.
Right, yeah, like Time Magazine and
Pictures
Weekly did reviews.
And people read it who, normally don't read comics.
Yeah.
So hopefully that casts that net a little wider still, and people will then come back to the book and give it a look. That's my plan anyway.
Yeah. Also, Jamie Smith said, the development of his The City strips through the 90s till now would tell an interesting story about the rise and fall of alt weeklies and the career of a working artist. And I'll stop there for a second and comment about that.
Yeah, except I'm not doing The City anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I stopped it 6 years ago, I think 5-6 years ago.
Okay,
I can't
so
remember when.
Not quite till now, but...
When I started doing books, I bailed on the weekly strip. But yeah, no, it certainly would. I came in probably a little late. I mean, I started doing The City in 1990, so you'd have to go back to more like 85 when Matt Groening and Linda Barry really kind of started getting widespread reprints. But I was present for most of it, 80 to really 1990 to 2000 or so. I mean, it was definitely the rise and fall. It was kind of depressing, really.
Yeah.
Those weekly papers, they were great. I foolishly, in the mid-90s, naively believed they'd be the saviors of newspapers, the saviors of journalism, and of course they were anything but. And they repeated the mistake. Not only repeated, they actually amplified the mistakes of the daily press, and they just went down in a fireball. It's too bad because we could use them. They were the good ones were very good, and of course there were most of them were lousy, but I mean the good ones were certainly worthwhile, and that's lost. And it's a lot of good comics too. Really, the best comics of the era, I think.
And mostly he just has comments here, but he says, please give him my appreciation. His art has given me so much happiness.
Oh, that's sweet. That's great. It's nice to hear. Glad somebody was reading. You kind of work in a void, especially with the weekly papers before the internet. You just kind of, somebody's out there, I hope, but you're never quite sure.
I remember seeing them too. I was in Japan already then, but I was getting Utney Reader.
Oh, sure,
in there, and I might have also been in the Comic Relief magazine.
It certainly was. Yeah, and you're really going back now. I eventually got banished from Utney Reader by Eric Utney himself for one cartoon I did. I can't even remember what it was. but that was enough for him. And Comic Relief, I think, went
Died around
collapsed.
2000, 2001.
Yeah,
think.
somewhere in there. It was a 90s thing. Comics reprint monthly, I think.
Yeah, it was monthly, and it had like a lot of those all-weekly comics, and Doonesbury was in it, and
Doonesbury
a few
and
newspaper strips, and a lot of like columnists, Dave Barry, and
Right.
people like that.
I think I have a couple issues at home. Yeah. It was a nice, slick magazine though that ran. And got into the bookstore, so that was nice.
I've still got a box of them at
Wow.
home.
Wow.
Filling up my closet
Musty
with
artifacts.
comics and stuff.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
sure, we're all there.
Yeah, that's the lot of the comics reader. Kumar also had a question about the cover of the Dahmer book. Because he said we failed to talk about it when we did our review. He said, I sincerely believe this is one of the most perfectly composed images I've ever seen.
Wow.
Dahmer is dead center in sort of a spotlight and staring right at the reader. The kids in 3 of the corners are oblivious to this powerful presence right in the middle of the room. Only Derf in the top left corner is looking at him, and even he seems pretty apathetic. It's such a perfect encapsulation of the themes of the book, and such a great drawing too, especially with the way the colors seem to create an aura around Dahmer. I'd like to know what Derf's process was behind the creation of the cover, and were there any earlier concepts that he rejected?
Oh, boy, were there. Not me. My editor is going to be so thrilled with this question because I think I did 15 or 16 cover concepts,
Wow.
pencils for this thing. And it was just an ordeal. It took weeks and weeks. I think it took almost a month. And Charlie, my editor, Charlie Kochman at Abrams, he was kind of a legend. He had this idea in his head, but he really couldn't. We just couldn't find it, and he wanted it to be a very typical high school setting to kind of accentuate the horror of it. My Friend Dahmer, but yet here's this scene of utter normalcy. I'm not pronouncing that word right. Why can't I pronounce that word?
Yeah, mundane.
Yes,
with
completely
future
normal everyday scene.
Serial killer in the middle of the room.
Exactly. And so we went back and forth, and we had him. At one point, Dahmer was looking over his shoulder back at me. This was like maybe 8 or 9 sketches into it. And finally, I wasn't liking the way it looked, and I said, well, I'll just turn it around. And then so that's when I centered it on the page, and he's like, oh, that's it. And then it was, well, move his leg this way, and have his hands here. And the last one was draw the Derf character looking at him while the others are kind of staring off. And that was finally the cover. And man, I was exhausted when we were finished that. The color was done by the art director, actually, at Abrams, because they have very specific ideas about color and because it's a big publisher. And they actually have something called a cover committee where they have to wheel these things out. And I picture like this dark room with men in robes and hoods on their heads,
silhouettes in the room,
giving thumbs up or thumbs down. But they everybody loved the cover, and that was finally how it was produced. And it was funny because my next book, Trashed, I set aside like a month because I thought I'll have to go through it again. And damned if it wasn't first idea. Yeah, that's it. Like, great. Now I got nothing to do. So you just never know. But My Friend Dahmer was a tricky one. I'm glad somebody noticed.
Yeah. So speaking of Trashed, I just read it yesterday. I guess it's been out a couple years now.
What year is it?
November 2015 or something.
Is that when it came out? I'll take your word for it.
What I found. But
right.
Yeah. Now, I guess you worked as a garbage man?
I did.
Like 1980-ish?
Yep. Right after actually... history. I mean, it's not biography. It's not autobio. It's fiction, but it's based on my experience. It was right after the events of My Friend Dahmer. So in my head, they're kind of companion pieces, which is one of the reasons I made it fiction rather than autobio, because it's like I got to get out of the 70s. Can't do another one in the same era.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering about the time setting. I mean, there's a scene where somebody's looking through a spinner rack of comics, and there's the comment that like this shop is like the only shop left in the world.
I just wanted to draw a spinner rack. That was like kind of that was the corner drugstore where I bought all my comics when I was a kid. And I was like recreating the interior. Mm-hmm. The store's long gone. The building's torn down.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to, I was like, I got to put the spinner rack. To hell with it. I'll just put it in there. It does confuse some people. I probably shouldn't have done it. But, people say, yeah, well, it's set in, 1980. It's like, no, it's not. He's using a cell phone and a laptop in the first scene. How can it be 1980? But I have no one to blame but myself. I think most people figure it out, though.
Yeah, well, I figured that was the dialogue was kind of an excuse to go to do a kind of a retro scene.
Yeah, it was. It was just I just wanted to draw a spinner rack. That's that's how I make my storytelling decisions. What do I want to draw in this scene? I'll figure it out as I do it.
But yeah, I felt like the book hit a lot of different kind of notes. I mean, it's not autobio, but it a lot the experiences were your experiences.
All the experiences that I show, they all happen to me.
And the one character seemed to be sort of the analog for you, the main.
Oh, the main character, a little bit. Of course, his fate is different than mine. I won't give it away, but
right, yeah.
So a little bit, yeah. I mean, he's kind of a straight man almost.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also the educational aspect of the research that you must have done, like what happens to the garbage and the history of garbage trucks and all this kind of stuff, and how much garbage we create.
Right, the shocking figures. Yeah.
Yeah, and you made a good point about how most of us think we just put it on the curb and magically it's gone, and we never think about it again.
That's right.
But it has to go someplace, and where does it go?
The reality is grim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering too. There's a page where you're explaining, like, we each throw away a certain amount in a day or a week, and then how much it adds up to a year. And you've got like piles of these bags of garbage that are, what is it, 5 pounds a week, 5 pounds a day?
A day, I think. Yeah, it's I can't remember now off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
5 pounds of garbage we throw away. Okay, how many 5-pound bags of garbage we throw away in a year?
Right.
So you got the whole stack.
Right.
How did you kind of measure that to make sure it was an accurate
I guessed.
proportion?
Yeah, I guessed. You got to figure out, well, I mean, I actually did try to estimate, what's the volume going to be, right? So how many would be on the front? And I think I actually used a calculator, so, I mean, it got close. But really, it's just kind of a visual effect. I mean, I didn't have to be that... parse it that finely.
But then at the same time, there's also a kind of a comedy in a sense.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah,
there's some scenes that are just pure, nothing to do with garbage. They're just comedy,
right?
And kind of a comedy of errors at some point.
Absolutely.
There's all going to be there's going to be a mistake here. Somebody's going to screw up. Somebody's going to accidentally jump in garbage.
That's small town government. I mean, it's just we're one step from disaster. That was my real life experience.
Right. Well, there's that too. All this local politics going on.
Right.
Right. And the gross out humor.
Yeah, very much so. Which is, I've spared some of it too. I mean, there were some that I didn't even, put in there. As hard as that is to believe.
Was the piano part real? The piano in the garbage?
Oh yeah.
Because I was struggling to imagine what that would sound like.
Yeah, it was quite a noise.
I guess as the strings were breaking.
Yeah, and the soundboard was shattering and cracking. I mean, it's quite amazing. And someone actually threw away a piano. And those trucks they'll grind up anything. They're very powerful. There's a great YouTube video where it actually eats a car, and it actually gobbles it up and it's gone. I mean, they're amazing machines.
You just need to somehow get it in there.
Right. I think they jacked it up. But all you got to do is catch the front end and with that blade, and then it just starts pulling it in, and then it's finished.
I was interested in how the sort of Derf analog character and his partner seem to be very green-minded. I might not have expected the garbage men to be sort of aware of environmental thinking. It's part of the message, I guess.
Right. I mean, it's hard when you're in the middle of that world not to be horrified at what you see unfolding. But green isn't quite the. I mean, you're aware of it, but I always, and I still carry this with me. I mean, it's a kind of a very pragmatic attitude. You know, the garbage keeps coming. Mm-hmm. It's not stopping, and we got to do something with it. And it's it's up to other people, the big shots, to figure out what to do with it. And right now, it's kind of a disaster. But we're not changing it from the bottom up. I mean, it's going to require a huge effort if it ever happens, and I don't think it ever will. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just, my attitude is fairly pessimistic. We live in a planet of trash, and it's just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, and you talk about how people, we want to do something, but we don't want to be inconvenienced by it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, water, drinking bottles are the prime example of that.
Yeah. Now, I think I'm living in Japan. I think it's better there.
Really?
I mean, the way that we put out the garbage is, I've often thought that Americans probably wouldn't tolerate it, because you got the day you put out the bottles and the glass and the cans and the burnable stuff and the plastic, and there's so many different categories, where here, like, I'm just supposed to throw this drink bottle in with the paper garbage? What?
Oh, well, we have single stream recycling. That actually works better. So, but, recycling is it's not the solution, because it still takes a tremendous amount of energy and resources to collect this stuff, separate it, process it, repackage it. I mean, you're not, green. It's only green in the sense that it's just not going to the landfill. I mean, it's still out there. It's the right thing to do. If you can break the waste stream just that one time, it certainly will help. But the solution, and this is what humanity will never solve, the solution is just to consume less. To make less garbage at the beginning. You stop using all this stuff, stop throwing all this stuff away. Recycling it doesn't let you off the hook. And, that's the big thing you trip up on.
Yeah. Well, and especially as you discuss in the book how a lot of industries depend on their products becoming obsolete.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
computers, TVs,
everything.
On.
Everything.
Yeah.
Appliances, all this stuff. It's just amazing. I know that we just redid our kitchen, right? And, I'm pretty anal about my garbage, and I'm very careful to put it out. But when they redid the kitchen, they gutted the thing, and they had this huge dumpster in our driveway, and they filled it to the top.
Yeah.
And they came and hauled it away. It's just going to an industrial landfill somewhere. And I told my wife, that's more garbage than we make in a year. And we just, exceeded it, and there it goes. And how many kitchens do they do a year? I mean, my book only discusses municipal garbage. It doesn't even get into industrial and construction and all. I mean, you can take those figures and probably increase them by fourfold to get the true figure. It's astounding. And that's, that's kind of the story of the book, which I wrap into this, I think, hopefully very funny narrative with, these great characters, and just kind of make a good read a lot of different ways, which is something I try to do in a book.
You mentioned single stream recycling. What does that mean?
That means all the recycling goes in one bin. It goes in one truck, and they take it to a plant where it's separated, rather than separating it at the curbside like apparently they do in Japan. And so it encourages people just to, they have a big can that they throw all their recyclables in, and then it's taken away, and there's no fuss, no muss. And that's how it's done.
Yeah, well, I think in Japan there's a tendency to we want to do something, but we're going to make the consumers do it.
Could be
with TVs and a couple of other appliances. They've mandated turning them in for recycling, but the consumer has to pay a fee to get rid of it.
Oh, right, sure.
And so then they create a problem of people dumping TVs in the ditch.
Yeah. Well, that could be also a government function too, whereas here a lot of garbage is privatized, so then it becomes an issue of money.
But I guess in Europe they have a similar system, but the consumer doesn't have to pay to get rid of the appliance. Right.
Well, Europeans are not exactly clean. I mean, if you've ever walked around Paris on garbage day, it's they're making a lot of trash. So it's humans are just pigs. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah, well, you go back into the history of dealing with garbage, and it's not much better than
No, it's never been good. There's just a lot more of us now. That's the problem. I mean, the world is couple billion more than when we were born, and it's it's an issue. Not necessarily for us, it's becoming an issue for our kids and grandkids. I mean, it's just going to be a nightmare.
Now, is your thinking about this the same now as it was when you were a garbage man, or
Pretty
has
much,
it kind of evolved over time?
No, it's a real eye-opener. I think everyone should be required to be a garbage man for like a month. And just to see, because it's so well hidden, it's really kind of a secret world, which is one of the fun things about doing this book, was exposing this secret world. Because nobody has a clue.
Wow,
and
that would be a good form of national service.
I would think so, yeah.
Never mind the military or
right, exactly.
Put them in a garbage.
I imagine there'd be, that would be probably a revolution. But
yes,
I think it would. That's the only way to really, I think, solve anything is to get a real. I would encourage anybody just to go to their municipal dump and take a look around because, I mean, they work very hard to keep all this stuff under wraps and under secret. And right now, they don't even allow the EPA to really chart the garbage anymore because Congress, has said, no, we don't want to know. We don't want anyone to know. So it's all just a mystery figure. And it's a problem.
And another interesting aspect was the foreclosure piles. You kind of get a look into that whole world.
Right.
Explain what that is.
Well, it's when people leave, people lose their homes. And this book was, written just as that crisis was still ongoing. And
after 2008.
Right, when they leave, they just throw everything they can't fit in the truck on the curb. And you get these giant piles of the garbage men have to pick up because the people are gone. The bank owns the home, and they don't care, and they just defy local ordinances. And we had a big problem in Cleveland because, especially the inner city, but really all over, with these banks, a lot like Deutsche Bank and Wells Fargo and Bank of America and some of these other creeps. They would just thumb their nose at city ordinances and city lawsuits and housing court and say, yeah, come and get us, They didn't care. They hid behind a squad of lawyers. But somebody has to take away all this trash. And so it's a very depressing sight. You can spot these foreclosed homes with this giant mound of garbage in front of them. And it's just
family mementos, as you show in the
right.
book.
It's like the, the American dream gone bad. It's like where we are now. So it's definitely depressing.
Did you run into many of those in 1980?
A few, but that's a more modern thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was out talking to garbage men as I was writing this book, and guys who are out there now. So
they said somebody wants to talk to us. Wow.
Oh, they were thrilled. Yeah, they were thrilled.
Now, how long have you been doing comics?
Oh, geez, I don't know. 5-6 years old. Professionally, you mean?
What kind of comics did you make as a kid?
I have stuff I made. I did some superhero stuff. I have some humor strips I did when I was a kid. I mean, it's just all over the place. First published was right here at Ohio State. I did political cartoons for the school paper for almost 3 years. And that was my first real, breakthrough. And that's what I started as a pro and then gave up on that, thank God. And started doing the weekly strip, did that for a while, and then gave up on that and started doing books. So I just keep switching one step ahead of the doom of various genres. I think this is my last switch, though. And I'm having a good time with it, so I have no desire to do anything else.
Yeah. So what have you learned about making comics since you did your first one?
What have I learned? Gosh, I think persistence. Definitely. I've always had most success making the comics that I want to make, how I want to make them. And it's when people tell me, no, do something else, do it this way, do it that way, that I really have problems. And that's, one of the reasons I got out of mainstream publishing. I just was like, screw this. And have found a way to make it work for me. And it's just dogged persistence, I think. And there might be a talent factor in there somewhere, but I mean, it's, you just got to have this single-minded sense of purpose to be in comics. You can't be stupid either. I mean, you've got to have a certain savviness about you, but business savviness, and I have just enough, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's always a kind of difficult, hard to find combination. I think somebody who's good artistically and has good business sense.
A lot of people have a problem with that. The second part of that, there's a lot of guys who are out there just, I'm like, what are you doing, man? I mean, you could be a lot more successful doing A, B, or C than you are doing what you're doing. I don't know. I mean, it's like, well, come on. But you got to find your own way.
Yeah, and Steve Bissette's talked about how the publishers, will mistreat the new creators and eat up their rights. And
you got to be. I'm lucky. I was lucky. I never really ran into that. Probably because I came up through self-publishing. It was a different ball game altogether.
Now, I assume, since you're publishing through Abrams, that they must be doing about some certain amount of publicity for you. But what do you do to publicize your work?
Being in comics is to constantly be selling. I mean, you just have to constantly publicize your own work online, do a lot of stuff online. Interviews, I do whatever I can. And, luckily these things just seem to keep rolling. Especially when you start being translated into other countries, and you're going different places and doing the media all over again. And it's a little bit, it can be a little bit, a little bit disorienting because, now I'm talking about Dahmer again. I mean, that book came out almost 6 years ago. And so I'm like, let's see, what did I say? What do I...
you have to read it yourself.
Yeah, you're trying to fish around in your brain. What was the talking point I had about that? Oh, yes, I remember now. And, it happens every time there's a new translation. But it's a nice problem to have.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you do a lot of conventions?
I do selected I really kind of avoid mainstream conventions. I prefer the so-called indie conventions like SPX and MoCA and the CXC here in Columbus, which is going to be fabulous. I'm doing APE this year on California. The mainstream ones really just kind of, I feel like I get home and I just feel like I need a shower for a week. And it's not my scene. I was at San Diego because of the film trailer. So I had to go out for that. And San Diego's a little different. I mean, San Diego can be whatever you want it to be because everything's there. So, if you want cosplay and Marvel and DC, it's there. If you want the films, they're there. But if you want indie comics, they're there too. So that's a little better. Now I'm getting sucked into New York Comic Con this year because of the film again, and that's just hell on earth. So I'll go one day for the panel, and that's it. And then, luckily New York's right there, so I can just escape. But I don't do the mainstream circuit at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you mentioned CXC, the Comics Crossroads Columbus, that Tom Spurgeon overseas.
Right.
I understand you're going to be kind of the featured guest at
That's what I hear, yeah. How about that?
The end of September.
The local boy makes good.
So what does that involve? What will you...
I have no idea. We'll be screening the movie here, which is kind of a coup for them. Yeah.
Okay.
Because
it doesn't... premiere,
or... it's a Columbus premiere.
Okay.
It premieres in Cleveland the week before. They're doing a special showing up there, which is already sold out. And then here, as part of the Comics Fest, there'll be a Q&A. That'll be fun, because I like talking about process and stuff with comics dorks. Talking about Dahmer trivia, I have no interest in that whatsoever anymore, but process interests me, so that'll be fun. And he got a screening of it somehow. The general release is later in the fall. I don't know if they've announced the date yet, for honestly. But then it'll be, in theaters everywhere, knock on wood. And it's getting a pretty huge buzz. So I think it'll be big for them. I think it's going to be transformational for the director. I think it's certainly going to be transformational for Ross, who's who plays Jeff. And hopefully it sells a boatload of books.
Yeah,
that's why I did it. So I'm not going to apologize for that. It's
sure. Yeah,
that's my career. That's what I'm here to sell books, and you want your work to be read. And I think it's certainly a very worthwhile story, and it's a worthwhile book, and I hope people, that wouldn't normally crack open a comic find their way to it because of the movie.
Now, you're living in Cleveland now,
Mm-hmm.
so
I don't know why.
When you were a kid in Dahmer, you were in what town?
It was called. It was two towns. Dahmer lived in Bath. I lived in Richfield. They were right next door to each other and shared a school district. They're on the outskirts of Akron, which is you have no reason to ever go to. It's a grim factory town that is now pretty much dead. Mm-hmm. Known for tires. It was the tire capital of the world at one point. Mm-hmm. Had the worst air pollution in the country, and it was a pretty dreadful place. But it produced some really remarkable people. A lot of musicians like Devo and the Cramps and Chrissy Hind and on and on and on. And then some comics folks. So it's
right. Yeah. Well, Ohio has a number of notable comics people.
Sure.
Harvey Pekar and
Bill Watterson.
Jeff Smith lives around here. Yeah. How do you? It was suggested I ask you, how do you see yourself fitting into the Cleveland comics
scene?
History.
The history, I don't know. I'm in there somewhere. The scene right now, it's kind of a vibrant little scene. We got some stuff going on up there. I think I'm, much to my horror, become the grand old man of Cleveland comics. Just by sheer attrition, I mean, Harvey had it, and then he passed away a couple years ago, so now it's fallen to me. I don't know how the hell that happened, but, I enjoy it. Cleveland has been good to me. It's a cheap place to live. It's a funky town. It's not a tourist town, but there's a lot happening there, and I'm perfectly happy there, and it's certainly inspired my work, so now we've got a sirens going on here in the podcast. So, it's been a good fit for me. And, I tell people all the time, one of the things about being savvy in comics, if you're going to go into comics, and you're starting out, you're not going to be making a lot of money at first or ever.
Yeah.
But especially at first, don't move to New York. Don't move to Portland or Denver or these places that are horrifically expensive. Move to some funky town that's cheap, with a good comic scene like Pittsburgh or Columbus or Cleveland or even Detroit, and you'll be able to survive. But not many people listen to me. Well, some people do. There are people actually moving to Columbus now. A couple bigger names have moved here just for that very reason. Spurgeon being one of them. Mm-hmm. And it makes it a lot easier to survive in comics if you're not paying $1,500 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment.
Mm. Yeah, I was just in Minneapolis, and they have a pretty good scene there, but I think it's getting expensive to live there too.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, not as bad as some of those other towns, but Minneapolis would be another one. That'd be okay as well. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind the cold.
Yeah. What do you think could be done in comics that hasn't been done yet?
What could be done?
What kind of storytelling, or what kind of story?
My view of comics right now is just overall very positive. I think we are in a golden era of comics right now. Not mainstream comics, obviously. Those are just falling apart. I just read an article in the Comics Beat where Marvel right now does not have a book selling over 60,000 copies a month. I mean, they're just falling apart. And the floppies are just, nobody wants to read them. But all other forms of comics are just, it's an explosion. I've never seen anything like it. Books, online, digital, minis, you name it. Especially books. And book series and these massive influx of readers, especially girls and women. Unprecedented. Yeah. And, it's producing some amazing work. But, mainstream comics fans want to wail about is that, Iron Man's not selling enough, or they don't like the reboot. It's like, who cares? The floppy is done. But I really have, I'm really excited about what's happening in the field. And I think it's a great time to be a comics fan because there is a lot to read. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't do anything different, really. I'd like to see the creators make a little more. I'd like to see some more publishers get involved and do some, decent books rather than just trying to do the same old, same old. I would certainly like to see Marvel and DC change their business practices a little in a way that doesn't, drive all the comic shops out of business. I mean, that's my big fear.
Yeah.
Is that if the floppy goes, then all those shops collapse because they rely on that weekly income. So, I mean, I think those two entities, corporate entities, owe it to the market to somehow support those shops and support retail. I don't know that they see it that way, but, I mean, come on. But other than that, no, I think it's a great time to be reading comics. It's a great time to be making comics.
I hear that you were big into punk rock.
I was.
Have you ever done any comics about punk rock?
I have. My first book actually was called Punk Rock and Trailer Parks, and is set in the surprising and vibrant Akron punk rock scene that produced some of those acts I was talking about earlier. Right. I mean, punk rock, believe it or not, sprung from really two places. Three places: Detroit, New York, and Akron and Cleveland. Those are the all at the same time, and I had a lot of fun with that book. It's hard to find because it was put out by SLG, which is kind of on the rocks. Hopefully, I'll have it reprinted at some point. But that was my first book. That's the one that really laid the groundwork for this late career resurgence.
When did that come out?
2010.
Okay.
2010.
So just before Dahmer.
Just before Dahmer, yeah. And I had to do that book before I did Dahmer because that's the book that taught me how to tell stories as a graphic novelist, as a long-form storyteller. You just have to do it. Coming from strips, it was a bigger learning curve than I expected. And that's the book that laid the groundwork for the later books.
Have you been a musician at all?
No, just art.
Okay, just an appreciator of...
Well, I mean, I did posters and record covers and, stuff like that.
So you did art for the bands.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what's coming next from you?
Right now, I'm working on two books. I just am about to sign another deal with Abrams to do another book. I've got a book, actually a sequel to Punk Rock and Trailer Parks that I've been working on for like the last year. That hopefully I'll finish at some point. And the new book, that'll be out in like 2020. I know it's slow. I mean, it's just, that's the downside of doing books is they take, 2 or 3 years to do a book because of the way that I work. It's just every word, every line, every shade, every letter is put there by me, by hand. And it's very labor intensive. The plus side is you get a very personal work, but the downside is, you're not going to get one every year.
And you're working completely on paper, not digital?
I do work mostly on paper, yeah. I just, not because I'm a Luddite. I was actually one of the first Mac artists. I mean, I was on the machine in like 1985 or 86. But I just like the physical act of drawing. I like to feel pen scraping across paper. I just enjoy it. So for me, that's the way I work. And then it gets scanned in, and then I, do some effects and in the Mac, clean it up, that sort of thing. But it's mostly, making comics is a very simple process. Pen, pencil, and paper. Making good comics, that's the tricky part. But making comics is very simple. That's the great attraction to it, I think, is that you don't need to invest in $10,000 worth of equipment. All you need is a piece of paper.
So yeah, the Dahmer movie sounds good. I did watch the trailer, and it looked like a movie straight out of the book.
Right.
So I don't know when it's getting to Japan, probably a year from now or something. But
yeah, it could be. I'm sure it'll do the festival circuit for 6 months or whatever before it moves anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that kind of popped out at me, I was trying to take a few notes listening back to the interview. He cites that statistic that he remembered seeing, and I didn't double check this, but that no Marvel book is selling more than 60,000 copies now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just listening to iFanboy too, where they said that they thought the quality of the stories coming from Marvel are the worst that they've been in the 15 years that they've been doing iFanboy. So I don't know what's going on at Marvel, if they're going to be able to get back on track.
There were some kind of I don't know what to call it, but I did see an article a little while ago that was somebody was speculating that Marvel would stop publishing comic books. And I think it was not really based on anything except that feeling that we're all having, and that number of nothing selling over 60,000, and it's all just IP now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and, of course, Mulele would be happy to see Marvel die. But, I don't know, I mean, maybe... other people say, even if it's not necessarily our thing, we need to have that part of the industry intact, I guess. I don't know. I think that they're going to need to change some of how they do things. But although on iFanboy they pointed out that when Marvel went bankrupt in the 90s, they had a chance to kind of revive themselves and rethink stuff, where now because of the movies they're sort of locked into what they're doing.
Well, they were in fact they were locked in. Okay, yeah, that's exactly right. And because there was so what happened was, after the bankruptcy, lots of crazy stuff happened, like the Peter Bagge Spider-Man book, and there was lots of kind of creative explosions happening at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when the first movie deal started happening, they asked George Clooney to be Nick Fury in a movie, and they showed him the comic that Garth Ennis had done,
or the Punisher.
No, it was Nick Fury, because Ennis had done a Fury comic.
Okay.
But it was really over the top. It was like his early Punisher, his Preacher stuff. It was so over the top, and George Clooney was like, "No way." And that's when Marvel brought the foot down and said, "Okay, no more of this goofy off Marvel stuff."
I think it was a Max title when they were doing that.
Yes,
Max.
It was a Max Fury, exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah, I do remember. But at the same time, I remember in the old days they used to say, well, it doesn't matter. DC had low sales figures, and people said, well, it doesn't matter because Warner Brothers owns them, so they don't have to make money. And you'd think now with Disney owning Marvel, they would be in a similar position where they don't have to make money. But I don't know. Is it,
I don't know. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, it was great to talk to Derf in Columbus. So
yeah.
Okay. Derf Backderf is on Twitter at Derf Backderf. He'll be headlining at Cartoon Crossroads Columbus in Columbus, Ohio, September 28th to October 1st, with a showing of the My Friend Dahmer movie. Check out cartooncrossroadscolumbus.com for info about the event. Tell us what you think. Write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com, Twitter at deconcomics. Like our Facebook page or join our Facebook discussion group. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com, and we can be found on YouTube, on the Comics Podcast Network at comicspodcasts.com, and on comiccon.com, where our new episodes appear a few days before they show up anywhere else. Also, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or iHeartRadio, especially on Apple Podcasts, also known as iTunes. After nearly 12 years of this show, we still only have 11 reviews there. More review activity on Apple Podcasts would really help us out, so please go there right now and write a few nice words about us. Our theme is from bensound.com. Coming up this Thursday on To the Bat Polls, Paul and I discuss the 1949 Batman and Robin serial. Did the 66 show draw anything from this exercise in bad filmmaking? Look up To the Bat Polls wherever you find your podcasts or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Critiquing Comics returns on September 28th, right here in this podcast feed. Next week, concluding Coom's trip to London Super Comic Con as he talks with Ram V, author of the graphic novel Graffiti's Wall, freelance illustrator Amrit Birdie, and Neil Gibson, writer and publisher at TPub Comics. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.